All right, we're live. Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Randy?
Excellent, thank you. Pleasure to have you here on our 56th Tech Sales Insight.
56. That's nearly as old as me, you know.
I know, I was just thinking about that. Yeah, almost. And just so I don't forget, we're sponsored by Gong. Uh, we've got a whole bunch. I know you got some companies that use it. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but a whole bunch of the top CROs, top companies use Gong. Gong enables revenue teams to realize their fullest potential by unveiling their customer reality. Patented Gong Revenue Intelligence Platform captures and understands every customer interaction and delivers insights at scale, empowering revenue teams to make decisions based on data instead of opinions. And lots of great customers. And so this is also brought to you by Sales Community, of which you're on the advisory board also. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So this is really special for me, and Andy's probably seen me grow up a little bit over the years, but had been several hats over the years. We never overlapped in England, but when he was on Wall Street, he was combo CIO, CTO, some of the best Wall Street companies, Merrill Lynch, Credit Suisse, BofA, UBS, and a whole bunch of great war stories, calling on him, partnering with him, selling to him, and I can say he was always brutal to negotiate, and he'll tell a little story later on. And but always more than fair. And then has been able to make a fantastic transition into the board world, advisor, consulting, venture capital as well. But I'm sure you can tell your story much better than I. So maybe tell. I don't know how you're going to cover the ground, but tell us about your background. It's a lot.
Sure thing. Well, thanks a lot, Randy. I obviously come from England, so that's a good place to start.
There you go.
So I was born in the Cotswolds, actually, just outside Stroud, and I moved to Henley when I was 10. I went to university in London at UCL, and I spent my first 10 years writing code at ICI, which then was a pharmaceutical and agrochemical company, Shell Oil, where I worked in process automation of refineries, and BT, actually, in Ipswich, which was their biggest tech headquarters at that time. And some of the work that was going on in Martlesham then still hasn't seen the light of day, I don't think. So that took me to 1994. I joined Paribas in their capital markets organization in 1994. I ran the now legendary Windows NT trading floor migration project at Paribas, which was the first Windows NT global rollout that ever happened. A product called NT350 Service Pack 0, and all of the other products were beta when we rolled that out. So that was a baptism of fire in financial services for me. Luckily, I got to work with some of the leaders at Microsoft and at Digital at that time, who was Microsoft's go-to-market partner. I left Paribas with 150 odd people. We all went to Merrill Lynch in London. I survived a year at Merrill Lynch in London, and then apparently I was driving too much change, so they decided I had to move to America. So I moved to the US and joined Merrill in New York, and I stayed there till 2006. Worked through .com 1.0, ended up running MLX, which was the institutional portal for our clients at Merrill during .com 1.0, and I ended up from 03 to 06 as chief architect of the firm. I founded Desktime in 2006. I left and founded Desktime with a friend of mine. The idea was that virtual desktop as a service was going to be the right solution for the world, and we were probably right, but out by about 10 years. So it's a story we can go into in detail later if you want to really go into that. But I mean, it was a successful business. Sold it to VMware, and I think it's it's still actually in use in some of the VMware products in that space.
And you had Peter Bell as an investor.
Peter Bell's an investor. Ron Fisher. Yeah, it was a good company. We actually hired Harry Ruder as CEO as well, who just sold Softricity to Microsoft in that period. So we had a really, really good team, and in the end, I think we built very good products, and people liked them. I did rejoin the financial services sector at Credit Suisse. I spent 2 years at Credit Suisse, 06 to 08. Came back to Merrill Lynch just in time for Bank of America to buy Merrill Lynch, which was an interesting experience. And then from 2010 to 2013, I was group CTO at UBS. I founded Santal East in 2014. I joined a couple of boards already by then. So I was on the board of Guidewire and Moogsoft by then, and I started advising Zscaler as well. And with Santal East, we basically started to work in the innovation community in New York. I became CTO in residence at FinTech Innovation Lab, which I've done for the last 8 years, which is the biggest incubator in financial services and insurance for FinTech and InsurTech. And then after that, really just built out the platform at Santal East. I joined a couple of other boards along the way. Right now, I'm on 6 boards, actually. I'm on the board of Zscaler, Pure, and Guidewire on the public side, and Moogsoft Digital Asset on the private side as well. And we're mentoring and building businesses right here in New York and in London and California as well. And then the other board that I joined most recently is Skyhive, which I'm super excited about. Its mission is to reskill the world, and we're making very good progress with that business as well. So I'm that brings us up to current day, I think. So there you go, all done.
That's great. So I know there's a lot of great stories tucked in there, but it was I think people might appreciate your kind of journey with Zscaler in particular.
Sure. I mean, my Zscaler story, I did post on LinkedIn, but I'll kind of walk you through it. So after 9/11, Merrill Lynch was in a position where the business on the east side of the river couldn't communicate between the North Tower of the World Financial Center or 570 Washington, or with anything in Jersey City, or with the rest of the world. And there was a very bright person in 570 Washington who figured out a really good idea would be to drill a massive hole in the wall between Merrill Lynch and UUNet, run fiber through that hole, and then build GRE tunnels over the internet to connect the Jersey City offices to New York, as well as the Jersey City offices and New York to the rest of the world over the internet. So one thing that I learned from 9/11 is that the internet is the most diverse routed network in the world. And what that means is if you're trying to build a network of your own and you're putting in fixed circuits between different places in the world, you'll never have as good diversity as you get from the internet. And so in the years after that, from when I was actually put in to run networks in November of 2001, I was like, well, we need to build an overlay network for our network so that if our network fails, we can run all of our traffic through the overlay network. We had a competition with 2 vendors. One of the vendors won, and they actually built a managed service for us across the world for our business that we ended up rolling out even to the branches in the US. It turned out that with twin MPLS lines going into the branches, quite often the backhoe went through both lines at the same time, whereas the internet providers like a Comcast or Verizon's internet services were using different conduits, so you could continue running the business over the internet. So when I first met Jay in 2010 and saw what he was doing, I was already a believer in the power of the diversity of the internet. In 2013, I was approached by Zscaler as an advisor, and I was very keen to get involved. I felt the internet was going to be the future of networking, and that proprietary networks, both from a backhauling perspective, where you just create latency and make it more difficult for your people to do business, but also the idea that you need to backhaul in order to do security just didn't make sense to me anymore. So in 2015, after 2 years of advising and helping to hire the first head of financial services sales in that business, and getting us into the kind of conversations with my peers from Wall Street that really helped, I think, Zscaler to understand the needs of Wall Street and Wall Street to understand the opportunity with Zscaler. I joined the board in 2015, and I view it as a work of passion. It's definitely something I'm passionate about, and even with our new products like ZDX, which are not really about security, they're about understanding the path between your cell phone and your Salesforce instance, and why is it running slow today is something we can diagnose in real time for any user anywhere in the world. I mean, this is amazing technology, which I wish I had as a CTO. So I like to get involved in projects and in companies where I believe in the outcome, I believe in the architecture, and I believe in the capabilities of the company to deliver on a long-term outcome for the enterprise. And that sweet spot for me between the enterprise and innovation was kind of what I did in my career, and now I'm doing the same thing in Sand Hill East as well.
Oh, that's great. So on with Zscaler and Pure being kind of bigger, public companies, what's your involvement on the kind of go-to-market side? Or I think the CRO is Dan Fitzsimmons at Pure, Dali Rajic at Zscaler. Kind of what type of involvement do you have there?
Well, I mean, quite a lot. Obviously, I mean, I know a lot of the people really well that are their clients, and I mean, I'll go on calls with them, and I'll talk to clients. I get involved also with the IR teams as well from every now and then, as in my role as chair of the compensation committee at Zscaler. There's often opportunities to talk to the buy side as well. So I spend a fair amount of time actually on working on the go-to-market, but more on kind of understanding what it is that the customers are looking for, and then helping to direct the way that we sell. And sometimes that's product, sometimes it's messaging, sometimes it's collateral, and sometimes it's just getting to the right person,
Yeah, oh, that's great. And then on your journey, we're talking about Dave Riley when we're prepping, so certainly great. Same thing. IT, Wall Street executives, been around. So my guess is he's probably on a similar journey to you. Any points you want to bring up being with Dave over the years?
No, I mean we're really good friends. I mean we didn't work together too long in London because he joined in London just a bit before I left. But when we worked together at Credit Suisse, I worked for him. He was head of infrastructure and I was CTO for the infrastructure organization. And Steve Hilton, Dave, and I just worked very, very closely together. We're still really good friends. We're actually going for dinner next Tuesday. And I think what we found at Credit Suisse was that with a CIO who sat on the board, which was Tom Sanzone, and with the right people in our organization, we were able to drive change faster than any of us had in our previous careers. Because when you're not arguing or fighting with your peers, but actually you're all trying to get the right thing done, and you're trying to out innovate the competition. That was the David Riley-ism that we were working on at that time. Out virtualizing the competition was part of that. I mean, we implemented VMware at scale in Credit Suisse in 2006, 7, 8, which like no one else was doing at that time. We were literally the flagship customer in New York, and we were able to virtualize away so much of our power problem that we actually sold the data center in North Carolina to Fidelity. So there were real tangible benefits in cost terms, but most importantly, we proved that you can consolidate even financial services workloads onto VMware and get 20 VMs running on one server, which changes the power profile, it changes the real estate profile, and it changes the data center profile. And that's the kind of change you can see. It's like doing work in your yard. When you've weeded the yard, you turn around at the end of the day and you go, I did that today. And it feels really good. And that's how it kind of felt at Credit Suisse in that era with David and Steve.
Yeah. Hopefully you didn't have creeps. So if you weed your yard, the weeds are going to come back next year. But hopefully with yours, you.
Well, the good thing about virtualizing away the hardware is the hardware's gone. So it's like it's very hard to go back.
Yeah, Dave Riley's great. Hey, whatever happened to Steve Hilton? I completely forgot about him. Is he still around?
Yeah, Steve went into CSC, what became DXC when the HP business and CSC merged, and he's now at Gamewell, which is in the healthcare space.
Wow, there you go. And for those watching along, we have Andy Brown, who's got a fantastic diverse experience. But if you want to chime in with any comments or any questions, feel free. You can put that in the chat comment line as well. So Andy, the topic is the other side of the desk of you on acquiring new technology. So most of our audience here is on the sales side. So what are some things that come to mind for some insights or best practices?
Sure. Well, I mean, probably the most cheeky inbound I ever had was via the board of Merrill Lynch, and I got asked to meet with two people that I'd never met before one afternoon. And they said, "Oh, these guys are starting a new business. It looks really interesting, et cetera, et cetera." And the salesperson, well, I thought he was the salesperson, was opening his laptop and he was having problems with his laptop. And I just grabbed his laptop and closed his laptop. And I said, "That's a whiteboard over there. Why don't you just show me what you're going to do?" And so he started to draw the pictures, and the story is that I took the pen and started to add things to his picture, and that company became a Copia because those two people were Cheng Wu and Chris Lynch, and that was a really good story from the Merrill era of actually people coming with great ideas and then adding the enterprise view on what was needed in a global file space in that example, and building a really successful business and product. So that was really a lot of fun. But I mean, I was involved in first of a kind many times because I spent a lot of time in California. I worked with the banking teams in California a lot, helping them understand the shifting technology landscape and what that meant to the incumbent vendors that they were often representing. And so, I got to meet companies like Riverbed when there was only 5 employees in Riverbed, when Riverbed wasn't even called Riverbed, it was called NBT, Next Best Thing. And I have the t-shirt actually still because there are only 7 of those t-shirts as far as I know. And I went to meet with them in South San Francisco in the height of the dot-com bust, what they called the nuclear winter in California. And Laurie Carvajal from Merrill took me there, and I started to talk to them. And Jerry Kennelly and Steve McCain were there, and Inktomi had just gone bankrupt, and they were like, we've got this idea, what do you think of this idea for wide area optimization? And I was like, this is really cool. So I hung out for a while and we whiteboarded for a while. I ended up talking to one of the investors that ended up putting money into the Series A there for them a couple of weeks later. And it was just great to get involved. It's a really weird thing, but like right after the dot-com bust, there were so many good ideas and there was so much kind of firepower available with funds that had raised money during dot-com at this kind of valuation, right, that were now able to invest at a valuation maybe 10x less than that in people that had already built real businesses like Inktomi. So it was a really good period actually, and I think that period 02 to 06 just was great for innovation. Like now, really, I mean, it's now it's just nuts, but it was really a good period because many concepts that were needed to drive the world away from the mahogany office that the dot-commers had tried to break, really came to the fore, in that period of time. So I mean, there's probably 10 different technologies from that era that really stood out. I'll pick on one. Fast was just this unbelievable technology from a Norwegian company, if I remember rightly. And we deployed Fast at Merrill, and I had a guy on my team who was like 2 or 3 levels down from me, called Zach Friedland, and Zach became the Fast guy, and he did a huge amount of work. And we would index data across multiple different systems so that you could find it more easily. So I remember this one use case where someone in the back office was trying to find a Citibank account in London for fixed income to allocate to, and previously they were just paging through green screens to try and find it. And after the implementation, they literally just typed in Citibank London fixed income account, and up come the 3 accounts, and then they just pick the account. So it's now, a 20-minute exercise is reduced to like 15 seconds basically. So that technology was magic. And at the time they were up against the Google appliance. Google's appliance was really hard to bring into the enterprise because Google wanted to put pretty restrictive licensing terms around you at that time. So Fast did very well in the enterprise, and obviously ended up getting acquired in the end. And Zach Friedland ended up as director of engineering at Apple. So that was a pretty big deal. Right. So putting young people into jobs where they were able to drive innovation in that period 01 to 06 was something that I did a lot of. And there's a lot of TLPs, which is the Merrill Lynch acronym for graduate trainees, basically, from that era, who are now in very, very big jobs in different places around the world. So It was
Great.
fun.
What about some pet peeves you have of bad sales practices?
Well, I mean, I think everyone's had the experience where, the salesperson's boss has called your boss because you wouldn't return the call. That doesn't work well with me, or it didn't when I was in the enterprise anyway. I think, there's always a way to get to people, and I think that if you don't have a compelling product, and the person's already said no, finding out why they said no is probably a good thing to do. But in most cases, when I say no, it's because I don't think there's value. And so I think, there's obviously, bad practices with regards to, inviting people out to things they're not allowed to go to, that kind of stuff as well. But that practice has pretty much disappeared, I think, at this point. So I haven't had too many bad practices, to be honest, but I think, being very direct with people, being honest with people, being transparent, making sure that when you do have a value proposition that it gets in front of somebody is super important. And, the thing I think a lot of salespeople don't realize is how busy the people are that they're trying to sell to. And so, doing things out of hours, doing things over lunch, doing things, even for 10 minutes over coffee is often the only way to get to those people. So just being sensitive to that, I think, helps. And sometimes people aren't very sensitive to that.
Yeah. When you talk about sort of proving the value of what you're selling, what's your advice there?
Well, I think the most important thing if you're going to someone senior is to have done your homework with the people who work for them, so you understand where the pain points are that you can help with. So going in to see a CTO or a CIO with a cold pitch is just a really, really bad idea. So collaborate with people further down the organization, contextualize where your capability can actually help the enterprise with a pain point. And then when you go to see the senior person, you're ready with a story that matches one of the problems that they already know about. If you can even go further than that and find out what their pet peeves are with this particular kind of technology, like it's failing on Fridays every week at 11 o'clock. I don't know why, but I'd like to know the answer to that. Is super important. The other thing is when you've got a long-term relationship, like, with storage vendors or network vendors or whatever, and they're trying to sell you new stuff, but the old stuff isn't working properly and they're not focused enough on it, there is no conversation that you can have about the new stuff, even if it's much better, that is actually going to be listened to until the old stuff is fixed. And I think oftentimes, again, people are trying to sell the next thing before the previous thing is even deployed properly. And I think that's a mistake. I really do think that the joint risk, joint return model for vendors wanting to work with banks in particular is super important. So that would be my advice. Just find a way to have skin in the game.
Totally great. There's a company, Decision Link, you probably haven't heard of, who's a sponsor of sales. They have a value-based platform. So all the things that sales teams kind of struggle with in terms of ultimately, it's if you're in the elevator, hey, how are we going to help your revenue, help your cost savings, profitability, competitive advantage, compliance, maybe, kind of crystallizing that. They've had a lot of success. That's been interesting.
Yeah, I think sometimes those value frameworks can be a bit generic. And that's why I think getting to the people further down the organization so you can make it specific is like really important. The generic ones are good because they get you thinking about the right things, but then taking it down to personalize it, I think, is really important.
Yeah, totally. And then, so speaking about some other sales tools, so with Gong, being our sponsor, I think you're saying that you actually have said, oh, you probably haven't heard of them. You said, oh, matter of fact, I have, and you've got some of your portfolio companies using them, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, when we think about kind of the use of machine learning and AI in relationships between customers and companies, we're investors in Netomi, which does that in the middle and back office for customer support. They integrate with Zendesk and Genesys and all that kind of thing. I think being able to pick up on the signal from the set of information that's going back and forth, is extremely important, and using that as a prompt potentially also to get the salespeople to focus on the exact kind of stories that are going to work with this kind of person saying these kind of things is going to get better over time, significantly better over time. So the text itself, I think, is really useful, but the algorithms are going to just keep getting better and better. So the text as a history will also be really useful. It's like, how hard is it for everyone to catch up with Tesla? Well, look how many miles have been driven by Tesla machine learning compared to everybody else. They just have a much better testing set than anyone else at this point. So that's kind of the way I think about Gong as well.
Yeah, that's great. And then actually, Carl Eschenbach, who we both know, is on the board there. So he's the one that had introduced me, and certainly is a great, high flyer doing well. And I've had a lot. It's amazing just the insights. I'll say on the one hand, you're listening to phone calls, but being able to give the coaching and the feedback and the insights and help the revenue teams make decisions really, it really is amazing how that works. So there's another story you were telling before about Pat Finn and Cabletron and Merrill Lynch and Cisco.
Sure. So one of the things we talked about with these vendors who are incumbent for a very long time, just a few minutes ago, is that they need to really keep their eye on the ball in terms of making sure you're a happy customer, making sure that their next products work well. And so in 1996 at Merrill, we were doing a new building in London, and we had wired the entire building with structured cable, and we were a Cabletron customer, and we wanted to deploy the newest, greatest Cabletron technology, which was still in beta at that time. So the product itself, the physical product, was not in beta, but the management product was. And with things that are real production systems, with the experience that I have now, I would never have done this, but this is basically what the recommended approach was, not from me, but from others. So we tried to deploy this technology, and we were 4 days away from going live with this technology, and basically the management platform crashed, lost the data that we put in, which was all the configuration data for the building that we were moving into. And we had to make a snap decision. And Pat had been, all the time trying to be helpful to us, help us solve the problem, and make sure that if his competitor failed, he was ready to go with the equipment that was needed, literally within a day, to get it into the building, up and running, and operational by the Monday morning. And in the end, that was what happened. It was you can imagine what kind of conversations happened around that. And I don't really want to repeat those right now. But working as a partner and a friend to the enterprise that you're selling to, and taking personal risk with equipment in his case, actually swung Cisco into a leadership position at Merrill for decades to come after that. And I think every transition point I've seen across the industry, where you've got a long, a technology with massive longevity, potentially being replaced, there's that one thing that happens, and then all of a sudden, lots and lots of things come to you. So the same thing actually with Cisco when I was at BT as well, but it was much earlier than that, 5 or 6 years earlier. But I think that same longevity is happening now. The interesting thing is, this question came up on a panel that I was running yesterday, was about multi-cloud, and if somebody has a security incident on one of the big clouds, are they just going to move to another cloud? And how hard is it to do that? And this was actually on a security call, so it was a really interesting discussion with some of the best security guys in the world. And I think the kind of net of that was that the security of each of the clouds is actually pretty good at this point. I mean, it's DoD level in many cases. So the most important thing is to make sure you're configuring properly, because that configuration on the cloud is really where you get caught out with putting workload there. So it's a good debate.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. Also, I think with the whole kind of as a service model, cloud-based software now, and even some of the hardware where you're I'll say almost literally plugging in the as a service, you're kind of almost easy on, easy off. right? So you got to
Well,
really,
the theory is easy on, easy off, but I think the barrier to exit or the moat is all of your processes are now based on that platform. So think about Workday or SAP as examples. You're not just adopting a SaaS product, you're adopting the processes that SaaS product provides. And yes, you can configure them, but once they're configured, it becomes, quote, the way you work, unquote. It's very, very hard to unplug something like that. It's not impossible, but it's really, really hard to do. So back in the day when we were doing Oracle Financials and Oracle HR, actually at Merrill, one of the things we did was we used Aris to model all the processes so that we didn't have to pick whether it was SAP or Oracle until the end, because we did all the process design in Aris. Every time you can abstract the way your business operates from the underlying platform, you're buying yourself optionality going forward. A lot of people don't think about it that way. They're jumping straight to, they jump onto Amazon and then they use all the proprietary technology that's on Amazon. And then the CEO goes, well, hang on a sec, haven't we got all our eggs in one basket on Amazon? Yeah. And they go, well, yeah, we kind of do. And, we could have done Kubernetes and actually figured out a way of doing multi-cloud, but we didn't do that. So now there's a high cost to exit. Now, the question is that technical debt or not? I don't know if it is or it isn't really, because sometimes you need speed, and using that technology that's very well integrated into the Amazon stack is extremely tempting. But creating products that can run on any cloud stack requires a good amount of design and architecture as well. So I think that trade-off is something we see all the time in startups, which really can't afford to do multi-cloud, and big companies that are being instructed by their clients as to which cloud to use, right? So that's another angle in this. It's not just about that. Sometimes the client wants to retire Azure points and you're offering Amazon. So it's like, this is the new world that we're in now. It's a digital trading world almost in points and quotas with these cloud platforms.
Absolutely. So as a reminder, we have Andy Brown, CEO of Sandhill East. So if anybody wants to comment or ask questions, we have Tucker behind the scenes to pull those forward. So Andy, how have you seen sales change over the years?
Oh wow! I mean, the one thing obviously is the Rolodex has disappeared. I still have mine actually. It's a good historical artifact on the desk. I haven't even taken the cards out from when I last used the Rolodex. I just left them in there. You probably have one in there actually somewhere with Randy's Seidel on it from like 1895 or something like that, But I figured one day a Rolodex will be worth something. It's like a Filofax. Sometime, But so obviously that's one thing that's changed. I mean, clearly COVID has had more impact on selling than anything I've ever seen in my life. I mean, most salespeople. My father was in sales. He couldn't stand being in an office. He had to get out, And I understand that. It's a way of living. It's also a type of person as well, and the type of person that likes to get out and about, be with people, talk to people, make good salespeople. And I think many salespeople during COVID got depressed. I mean, I think it is depressing if you're not with people. That spark of energy, the innovation that happens when you're in the room with somebody is very hard to get with the two-dimensional experience on Zoom. Interestingly, actually, the FinTech Innovation Lab last year used a platform called AltSpace VR with Oculus. And that's the first time I've used a digital platform where I was like, you know what? This is actually pretty good. So I think the metaverse actually might be an alternative to in-person, but it's not the same as in-person. It's better than two-dimensional Zoom, but it's not as good as in-person. And I think so that change is the biggest I've seen in the entire history of sales, actually. The idea that salespeople couldn't go to the customer to close a sale is something that it took 6 months for many people to get their head around that, to be honest. So I think that's a big change. I think that the other thing that's changed really is the trajectory of companies. So when you had to build products that worked on hardware that was acquired from one of the Intel OEMs or whatever, or Sun or whatever, there was this lead time where you had to get the hardware in, you had to get it installed, you had to get the software, put it on the hardware, then you had to configure it, then you had to have programmers build stuff for it, and then eventually you got to deploy things. These days, that can happen in a week. And so the speed at which products are created, the agile sprint timescales now between 7 and 14 days can really move the capabilities of a platform in a different way than previously. So particularly the sales guys we hire into early stage startups, they've got to be agile themselves. I don't mean agile in terms of sprints, although interestingly, many of the best sales teams are doing stand-ups and sprints themselves now. I mean, they've adopted the same technique to get them focused, to get them on their feet in the morning, to get them to talk about the pipeline they generated yesterday, to kind of get this energy that comes from goal-based outcome. So I do think there's a change in the how in the younger companies. You don't actually see that change though in the older companies, but they need to, because they're now up against a relentless workforce of new salespeople who have these new techniques. They have sales enablement built into the way they do processes. They've got the people.ai's and all this other technology like that. So to me, sales has become a digitally enabled process. And that was never the case, 5 years ago, even, but definitely 10 years ago. And so this idea about prospecting, value-based selling, all of these things have changed. But the fundamental thing, which is connecting with people, understanding business problems, being able to relate those business problems to the capability you're bringing to market, getting people excited about it, feeling like it's a partnership. These are the things that haven't changed. The how has changed, not the what, I guess, is the way I would say it. So that's how I feel about it. And, I learned a lot from my dad. I learned a lot from Gary Kirkham, who was the head of investment banking at Merrill, a TMT group. He recently left, actually. But one thing I learned from watching Gary and my dad is that to sell something to somebody, you don't need to sell them anything. What you need to do is have a relationship with them and talk to them. And so, that's a lesson that I teach people. Don't try and sell me stuff. Sell me. Don't do that. Let's just talk. Let's talk about, what's going on today, what's going on with the business today, what are the business problems. Let's have that dialogue, not, can you buy more storage from me because it's the end of quarter and I need to make my quota or whatever. So those are the puppy eyes, by the way, if you didn't see those.
There you go. Well said. All right, from Carl. Thanks, Carl. What are Andy's thoughts on being relevant these days when prospects can do so much of their own research online? Additionally, what do clients and users appreciate from the modern day sales campaign? So I think you touched on some of this, but
sure. Well, I think that first of all, hi Carl, good to hear from you. I think the thing I would say is, you should assume at this point that all prospects have the ability to use Google, right? You should also assume that they can go to the peer review platforms and see what people are saying about your platform. You should also assume they go to Glassdoor to see what employees and ex-employees are saying about your company, because you'd be crazy not to do that, wouldn't you? So what I would do, I think, in thinking about that is incorporate all of that. Assume they've done all of that work. If they haven't, you've got the 5 slides that actually talk to that. But if they have, you jump over those 5 and say, well, look, I'm sure you've read all this stuff online about us. You've probably seen the peer reviews between us and our biggest competitor. Let me talk to you about the things you don't read online. Let me show you some things that we've done with customers that aren't even public right now. I mean, so I think being cognizant of the way the world is, and the way the world is different than it was 5 years ago in terms of being able to access that information, is super important. So as a client, if you're selling to me, I appreciate humor, first of all. So I mean, you can imagine how many cold emails I get a week, right? And I respond to the ones that I think are clever just because they're clever. And I say, look, actually, this product's not relevant to what I'm doing, but I'm going to give you feedback on what you sent, because somebody sent me one the other day, and the subject was, I bet you're surprised that I have the audacity to send you this email. And I'm like, you know what? That deserves a reply. So I think when you were trying to do a cold connect, being original and being authentic is super important. So That's probably how I would answer the question. I mean, one other thing actually on the campaign, since I didn't really answer that specifically. I think when you do have campaigns and you do have deals that you're offering, making sure that there is a real need is super important, because otherwise people feel like it's sell again. So I think if there is a need that you know about and it was going to get bought in a quarter's time, and now they could buy it sooner and get a really good discount, then I think that's a very good conversation to have.
Yeah, that's great. And also there, a client yesterday I was talking to, and somebody that we know, and we not sure if they're interested or not. They've kind of been blowing them off, and so we just said, hey, look, if you're interested, great. If not, no big deal. Let's just not waste each other's time. And lo and behold, they come back. So no, sorry, we're interested. We're interested. So
Yeah.
that was kind of interesting. So Carl, thanks. So again, for others, feel free to post any comments or questions. So I know you also do keynotes. What's your thought of the importance of events as we're coming out of COVID?
Well, I think everybody has this kind of huge sigh of relief post COVID, and we actually did a party pretty much the week after you were allowed to do a party in New York in the summer. So we did a rooftop bar party, and it was literally like a coming out ball. Like, people were so happy to see other people. It was one of the best events I've ever run. Actually, it was really, really good. So, and the purpose of that was nothing. It was just, you know what, Sand Hill East, people who work here, people we work with, people who are at the enterprises that we talk to, let's just get together and have a few drinks and snacks on a rooftop bar and just talk to people. So the importance of socialization, I think, is super important. It's so easy to fall into the belief that Zoom is the new way of doing business. And Zoom is a way of doing business, not the way of doing business. So I think when it comes to customer events in particular, getting prospects to customer events and using the relationship with customers and prospects in a way that is very respectful to the prospect, but allows the customers to effuse about things that they've done that have changed the way they do business, is exactly the right model. People don't want to be PowerPointed to death at those things. They want to meet people and they want to find out things. That's definitely something that's changed, I think, in terms of what people attend those events for post-COVID as well. I think people are looking for that interaction. They're not looking for, track A, track B, track C. Let me run between all of these rooms. And, I think you've got like a set of things that you want to communicate, and those things should be communicated, but there should be a lot more networking time than there has been. And one other thing to say there is the use of dinners and lunches for like 10 on 2s versus, these kind of sub rooms with like room for 80 people, but only 20 people sitting in the seats. That just doesn't work well in my experience. So I think, and by the way, that's changed as well. I presented at Sweet World a few years ago, and I did one of those sub room, presentations, and it was fine. But now I think it's changed. I think people are looking for interaction with other people rather than, teacher at the end of the room with the PowerPoint or the whiteboard and that kind of conversation. I think people want to engage more.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of my advisory board folks and CRO friends that are definitely on the road, and they've all said huge appetite of people that want to see and be seen. And I know there's some in sales that say, geez, company policy maybe not travel and not get out, but again, we may be old school, but it's definitely nothing like getting out there face to face. Not just with your teams, but customers or prospects as well. So still back on the talk more on the sales side here. So you've worked with channel partners and SIs over the years, correct? Systems integrators.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously Zscaler uses a number of SIs, but most of the businesses we're running that are startups, I've really stolen a leaf out of Guidewire's book here. And that is, you don't want to build a services organization that's bigger than your product and your sales organization, because as soon as you do that, the way people look at your business is very different than if you're a product-led company. So we actually work with the broadest sense of SIs. So most of the Indian vendors, yes, the PwCs, Deloitte, CYs, Accentures, and so on. So, you know, digital asset, for example, I mean, our go-to-market partners are all of the above. You know, we have the model that Guidewire built that's clever is that you have a set of black belt services people that you can deploy into projects, but your core go-to-market is actually with the partners, and so with the SIs. And sometimes the SIs originate, sometimes both of you originate, and sometimes you originate and you bring them in, or you originate, the client does an RFP and they bring them in. So, I mean, I think you need to be open to the kind of different paths for the user journey there. But my view is strongly that the SIs are very, very good at what they do. And when you can insert people into the SI projects that can actually be, that can change the certainty of success of those projects, because you've now got the core expertise and you've got the pipeline back to the product team if you ever need it, is a really, really good business model. So we use that in a lot of our businesses. I'd say 70 to 80% of our businesses are using a model where we're not trying to build a large services organization. We're trying to give that to those guys. One thing I tell you is that those guys don't wake up until someone big says, I want to do something. So you can talk to them, and they're like, yeah, you know, and then all of a sudden they start to see their customers saying, we're going to deploy this company. And they're like, oh, isn't that the company that Andy's been telling us about that we should be? Yeah. I'm like, so then the call comes the other way, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, sorry we didn't engage last year. We really wanted to. And then it's about training their people quickly so they can get, you know, so they can get up to speed on site at the client. But interestingly, I mean, in the conversations I've had this week on this topic, and I've talked to 4 of them this week, they are running out of people. So the same exact problem that we see in the restaurants in New Jersey, where there's just not enough staff, and so the service level has gone down significantly. That's exactly what's happening inside a number of the SIs in the US. I've seen the same thing in the UK. I haven't seen it anywhere else. I don't know that that's happening anywhere else. So they're having to be selective about which projects they take on now, which is, I've never seen that before. So just a data point.
Yeah. What about, I'll call the VAR kind of channel partner side of things, more from the perspective of you as a user, you know, kind of value that you get from them?
Well, I think the VAR space is actually really changing. So, I mean, obviously,
feel free to name names for those that you like or don't like.
Well, I mean, you know, various of the companies I work with have VARs selling their products directly. Some of them are 100% channel and VAR based, and some of them are using VARs as well. I think the key in the word VAR is V, and it's about value. So if there isn't value and it's just the product is passing through the hands of the VAR, then as an ex-buyer, I have no interest in doing that unless the VAR is getting me better discounts. That's the only reason I would do it. In general, I think the VARs that are successful do add significant value, and they require me as an enterprise buyer in my old life to have to do less in order to get something deployed. The thing that VARs need to do more of is take execution risk. So by taking execution risk, they can get paid more. So that's something that I am surprised has not happened more at this point. The SIs also don't like taking execution risk either. And so what ends up happening is that the customer ends up with most of the execution risk. I think over time, and this relates back to our discussion on SaaS earlier about the cost to exit and the moat and all that. Over time, I think that the SIs and the VARs are going to have to take more execution risk, and potentially the world might end up more in a model like Japan, where almost all of the things you sell into Japan are done through a services company, and product companies generally don't talk to end consumer companies because the platforms are sold as a service, more like a managed service than the SaaS definition of the word service. So I definitely see that. I think, with MSSPs in particular, just looking at the gap in the number of security people that are needed in the world versus the number that exist, MSSPs are the only way, I think, to get access to the quality resources, tooling, and platforms that you need to successfully manage your security stack in most companies. really large companies can afford to build that kind of technology, but also, I mean, the people are just very expensive. So to my mind, I think there is a new MSSP model emerging. ReliaQuest is an example of one of those, and there's a number of others out there. But I've watched ReliaQuest grow from small to large, and they're not tied to vendor; they're tied to service. So whether it's end user malware detection or network protection or whatever, they bring the set of technologies that provide the best service to their clients in a similar way to Net1 used to sell networks in Japan, as I said. So that's kind of that change, I think, is going to persist, actually.
Wow. And you were telling an interesting story before. I make sure I shamelessly plug my book, The Sales Advisor. But you said you actually use it.
Yeah, I totally use it. So the power of no, which is actually my favorite story in the book. It's not just because Chris and I are friends either. I just thought the power of no was like really, really good. And so I thought I was in a meeting the day that I read that little sub segment in the book. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to try this. And my partners will keep me honest here. I tried it and I couldn't believe how well it worked. I've used it like 10 times now. It's like, okay, if you don't want to do that, it's fine. We'll just walk away. Right. no, we don't need to walk away. So yeah, the power of no is really good, and it's not a scam either, because oftentimes I do actually feel like that's the right thing to do, and the old me before I read that wouldn't have done that, and I am doing that, and I am taking other hints and tips from the book and trying to incorporate those into the way I work. I think the thing that's good about the book is it doesn't actually matter what kind of person you are. There are tips in there from so many different kinds of people. Some of them will be interesting and useful to you. And I love things like that are like compendiums of best practices. I mean, it's just I think it's just really good. So
Compendium. What was that word? Compendium.
compendium.
Oh, okay. I have to look that one up. What about on the mentoring side? Mentors that you've had, coaching advice that you've received over the years?
Sure. I mean, I've worked for many different kinds of people, and in the period that I mentioned earlier when I was a programmer, I was actually a contractor for 6 years because every company I worked for wanted to promote me into a role where I wouldn't write code, and I didn't want to do that. So I wrote code. And when I was a contractor writing code, my mentors were other contractors who were much older and much more experienced than me. And they were people that were good at math. They were people that were good at business logic. There were people that were good at solving really hard problems. In my first job, all of my bosses had PhDs in physics or math from Oxford or Cambridge, and so, or chemistry actually as well. And so, I mean, the one guy, Robin Taylor, I mean, he literally had solved almost every math problem in code. And he had this library that came with him from the university. We hired him from a uni, and this library pretty much let you do anything. It was just amazing. So I think I had very technical and academic mentors in the first 10 years of my career. And some of them persisted actually throughout the rest of my career as well. But by the time, one thing I learned at BT actually that I'll just relate as a story. BT was Oracle's biggest customer, and Larry spent a lot of time actually on site at BT. And I remember when they acquired the Oracle Case technology, which was, I think, a UK company, if I remember rightly. He came in and he talked about Oracle Case, and it's the first time I'd seen the CEO of a tech company from California come into a British company and talk to us about it. And I remember his euphemism was, with Oracle Case, it's like a chainsaw. You can cut down trees really fast, but you could also cut your arm off fairly quickly as well. But what happened in that session for me was Larry Ellison got humanized for me in that session, and I was like, he's just a normal person, like anybody else, right? And so, in 2005, I followed him at the Merrill Lynch Research Conference that he presented from 3 to 4, and I had the graveyard slot between 4 and 5. and of course the drinks were at 5, right? So everyone's like, yeah, Andy Brown, whatever. And so when Larry left the stage, I mean, you can imagine what the room was. This is in Santa Monica, right? The room is like packed with people. There are press, cameras, all this stuff. So I get on stage with Gary Beach, and who's the managing editor of Wired magazine, and I said to Gary, I said, so what do you think? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, what do you think is success here? I said, I'll tell you how I'm going to define success. We've been given the graveyard slot. Thanks a lot, guys, for doing that. But we've been given the graveyard slot. So I'm going to define success as 1/3 of the people that were here at the beginning who came here only to see Larry Ellison are still here at the end. So we that actually worked out pretty good. He actually asked me in that interview, he said, what's the one thing in 2005 that you think is the most overlooked technology in the world? I said, mobile development. Go figure.
There you go, Apple and everything else. When we're getting, we're almost done here, but wanted to ask a couple more things. What about, you've got some great perspectives on what do you think about in terms of building diverse teams?
Well, I think with diversity, I think the number one thing that's important is diversity of thinking. We always look for resumes, actually, that we call the winding road. People who've worked in different industries, done different kinds of roles, have had different experiences. Julius Caesar said, experience is the teacher of all things, and I believe that. So you don't want people that have had the same experiences. You want people with different experiences. That's what diversity is. And diversity of all of the other kinds of diversity, whether it's race or creed or religion or gender or whatever it is, are important in terms of your input pool and your slate, if you like, of what kinds of people you're bringing in. But you can have people who meet all of those criteria, yet don't actually offer the diversity of thinking that you need. And one thing I've learned from big enterprises, particularly failures in big enterprises, is that when you're either too scary as a leader for people to challenge you, or you surround yourself with yes people, the pain that's going to come is like nothing that you've ever seen in your life. And so I think it's important for people to be strong, to be able to voice their opinions, for their opinions to be heard. And I think it's that diversity of thinking and diversity of background that allows people to express those views, and for good leaders to listen to them and incorporate them into the way that they make decisions, the way that they work, and so on. So I've always tried to build teams myself that way. It's much more conscious now than it used to be. It used to be like, I want people that think differently. Now there's a lot more kind of external pressure, I think, on people to build teams that way. But I think people that build great teams have always done it that way, because that's the way you get the best outcome. In the end, the outcome is what matters, and the outcome is better when you have more diversity. So I think that's the trick.
Great perspective. So if Nour was here, good news is his parents are doing better with COVID. He's back in the States now. He had some flight issues out of Denver, so wasn't able to make it today. But he'll usually ask any PG story about me or Randy that you want to share.
Oh, a PG story about Randy. Well, there's one that actually does spring to mind from Credit Suisse. So we had this deal for outsourcing our maintenance on our hardware to Sun, and there was a massive contract back and forth between the procurement organization and the technology organization and Sun. And there was this final call where we were going to agree a deal. And I talked to the procurement team at Credit Suisse ahead of time, and Steve Hilton and David as well. And I said, we're going to have a lesson today on the power of silence. And they're like, okay. And I said, what that means is when I speak, no one on our side of the table speaks. so they're like, okay, actually David was my boss, so it's like whatever. So we get on the phone, and the Sun team and the procurement team at Credit Suisse are like, well, okay, we're all set. We're going to sign this deal at this price. Everything's good, and we're just basically waiting for the yes. So I was like, well, I guess if we could sign the deal at $500,000 less than this number, then we could probably just agree it today. and they're doing what you did. In fact, you might have even done that. If we'd have been on Zoom, then that might have been what happened. So I said, why don't we put you on mute and you guys can go talk about that for a minute. And if you want to do the deal today, then you can come back on the phone and tell us. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, you and Jonathan and the rest of the team came back and did the deal. So when I was coached by somebody, she taught me about the power of silence. And in particular, when you're public speaking, silence makes people lean in. Silence also makes people tell you things, by the way. So it's a very powerful tool, silence. And most salespeople probably need to learn it, themselves. And just watch the behaviors that happen when you stop speaking.
Yep.
Because people lean in and people engage and people tell you things. And so, that's my final Randy story. It was a good deal for Sun. It was a good deal for Credit Suisse, and it probably still is.
Yeah, exactly right. $10 million, nothing wrong with that. So we are at the end. So I want to thank Gong. Again, with Gong, customers experience improved win rates, increased deal sizes, and accelerated employee ramp times. Tucker, behind the scenes, thank you so much. And Andy, you've been fantastic. Look forward to continuing to collaborate with you on different projects here.
Sounds great, Randy. Thanks a lot for your time.
Right.
And thanks a lot to the audience.